Yes, I'm a GP. I was working in general practice and
You were in
A&E?
I was in A&E over the New Year's period, so we've both seen what happens on that front line. General practice being one of the most pressurised areas of the NHS, and A&E, where we're seeing it play.
Well, let's get back down to A&E again, because as Ruth was saying, it's the dumping ground for everybody. So if you're sitting in your GP office, you have got very few options, haven't you, about social care in the community or whether to send someone to A&E, and then what A&E do. Everybody just throws everything at A&E.
Well, the problem is A&E is a gauge of the NHS, or it's used as a gauge of NHS performance, because everything's linked. So when everything else is struggling, A&E is where people end up, and that's why we look at A&E so much. But the problem is across the system, and it's been going on for several years. This crisis is nothing new. This crisis has been there year on, year out. It gets worse every winter.
And how does that affect all of you, morale, day to day, when nothing seems to be changing or getting better?
It's so difficult when you have patient after patient coming in saying, you know, I was sat in A&E for 7 hours, I didn't get seen, so I've come back to you again. And you know, your heart sinks a little bit, because you just think, wow, you know, you really needed that further care, and you weren't able to get it. And it's so hard, because I love the NHS, I'm so passionate about it, and I want to make sure all my patients get the best care that they can get. And at the moment, I'm not sure that's happening.
What about decisions, Ranj, that you have to make? Have those changed over the years? The decisions you make, does it worry you that sometimes you're sending people home when really they should be?
Do you know what happens when you have a finite set of resources, which is what we've got, and you're having to make sometimes harder and harder decisions? Something has to give, and what we're seeing, sadly, is we are taking slightly more risks than we normally would do.
Give me an example.
So that child, for example, I might see, you know, late at night, who I would like to keep in overnight for observation. If you don't have a bed, I have had this conversation with parents where I said, look, you're going to have to stay in A&E. It's probably going to be about 10 or 12 hours, potentially, before we find you a bed. You could go home if you're happy to do so, and here's the things to look out for. But normally, I would keep you in.
So you're not
having
happy
to make
making
those
that decision?
The level of risk we are having to take is higher, and sooner or later, something's going to give. The other thing we're finding is everyone's stress levels are up, so we're being shorter with each other, we're being shorter with our patients, and I have to sit myself down when my compassion reserves are completely gone and have a chat with myself and say, look, it's not the patient's fault. This is a system thing, and sometimes you just have to remind yourself why you're there, and that's really
And what about
sad.
in general practice, Sarah? Are you finding, you know, you're having to hand out more painkillers because someone like Mark, who's had his hernia operation cancelled, is in pain, so he comes to you and says, well, I don't know when it's going to be.
Well, I've had almost an identical situation with the shoulder operation, and they've had to come back to me. I've had to give sick notes because they can't go to work anymore, so that's also taking money back. You know, and they're getting depressed. They're getting low in mood, and you're having to dish out, you know, painkillers that ideally you don't want to be doing.
Sarah and Ranj, if I put you two in charge of the health service tomorrow, you could wave a magic wand, money was no object, what would you do? Is there a single thing that you think this would help?
You need a cross-party committee that looks after the NHS. Remove it from any political interference, because one thing I can tell you is that the political input that the NHS has had has sometimes been valuable, but it has been very expensive and wasteful. What we need is cross-party management. We need better investment targeted at the places that it needs to go. That's what we need to do. We need to depoliticise it. That's my belief.
Sarah?
I feel quite a lot of money goes towards hospitals, and you know, I do understand that, but as a GP, I think a lot needs to come to the front line and to community basis as well.
Social care. People ending up in hospital.
Exactly. So let's stop it before it gets there.
That's what I'm saying. Reform, reappraise how we use A&E. Guys, thank you very much, and good luck, and thank you for the work that you do on behalf of us all.
Yeah, thank you. And you are staying around today, aren't you, to take a call?